So I'm glad to be here today. I'm Eric Wilkinson. As Azetta mentioned, I am one of the therapists in the Office of Work Life. Today's topic is You're Okay When Everything Is Not Okay. And as a bonus, that's actually inspired by a song lyric from a musician in the 1990s. So if you know who the musician is, that an exact lyric is actually, I found the secret to life. I'm okay when everything is not okay. If you know who wrote that song lyric, you're welcome to put that in the chat. And then when we get to the end of the presentation, we'll see if anybody knows the song. Okay, so what I would like to do is I'd like to start off with a couple of exercises. But very briefly, I will just talk about what's the focus today. So we are going to explore what leads us to feel not okay. We're also going to look at what strategies can actually enhance your well-being in the presence of emotional and psychological distress or in the presence of threats. And then finally, we're going to give you some opportunities to set some positive intentions going forward. So our first exercise, this is a survey, but this is not a public survey. This is just a personal survey. Look at the following statements and see which one best describes the way you feel right now. I accept myself just as I am. I have strengths and good qualities, but there is always room for improvement. There are areas in my life and myself that I really need to work on. I am failing in major areas of my life. Again, this is not for you to share. This is just for you. Just take note of which one of those statements resonates with you the most, and we will revisit this later on. Second exercise, just to get our brains active, bring us into this present moment, is just to ask if you, this is a public exercise, if you can put in the chat, when do things feel not okay? Just whatever comes to mind, there's no right or wrong answer. Just type into the chat, when do things feel not okay? And then Zeta will read some of the responses.
I'll give you guys just a moment to type something there before I start reading them off. So some of the responses include when overwhelmed, when you feel out of control. There's another one for feeling out of control, loss of routine, uncertainty, behind on work, overwhelmed and no control, busy schedules, when you can't handle the basic day-to-day, when I feel that far more is expected of me than I can realistically do. There's no order, multiple family challenges, overwhelmed, too many commitments, uncertainty, too busy, overwhelmed, loss of loved one, just about everything these days. Too much to do, not enough time. Things that keep occurring faster than you can keep up with, loss of loved one, not getting any answers.
There's some really powerful feedback there, and a lot of comments about feeling overwhelmed, assumed by emotion or by demands being placed upon us. Also heard several references to people losing loved ones or just overall sense of loss. Also heard several work-related comments about feeling like there's not enough time or feeling like you're falling behind. I think it's important to note that feelings of loss of control, which do arise when something terrible happens in our life, like the loss of a loved one, or when work is not going well, or relationships are not going well, feelings of loss of control is one of the kind of core existential fears that pretty much all human beings experience at times. Feeling overwhelmed can mean a lot of different things. That can be that just emotionally the times are really difficult. It could also mean that we feel like we're somehow inadequate in some way to meet the current challenges. So I appreciate everyone who shared. What I'm going to do is we're going to do one more exercise. And this one is going to be focused, it's actually going to be a guided visual meditation practice called Compassionate Friend. And this is an opportunity for us to bring ourselves into this present moment and maybe to cultivate a new way of feeling that could be helpful. And again, this practice is something I will refer back to later in the presentation. So if you feel comfortable, just this practice is done best with your eyes closed. So allow yourself just to settle into your chair. If you have your video on, you can turn your video off to do this meditation practice. Allow yourself to find a comfortable position. You can either be sitting or even lying down. Gently close your eyes and take a few deep breaths to settle into your body. Perhaps even put one or two hands over your heart if this feels comfortable. Perhaps on your belly, or you can let your hands just relax in your lap. Now, imagining yourself in a place that is safe and as comfortable as possible. It might be a cozy room with a fireplace, or a peaceful beach with a warm sun and a cool breeze. You may be out in the forest amongst beautiful trees, lovely birds. It could also be an imaginary place. Maybe you're floating on clouds, or you're some mysterious island. Anywhere where you feel reasonably peaceful and safe. Letting yourself enjoy being in this place. Soon you will receive a visitor, a warm and compassionate presence, a compassionate friend who embodies the qualities of wisdom, strength, and unconditional love. This being may be a spiritual figure or a wise, compassionate teacher. It may be a person from your past, like a grandparent, or the being may have no particular form. Perhaps it's just like light, a warm presence. Your compassionate friend cares deeply about you and would like for you to be happy and free from unnecessary struggle. Please allow an image of this being to come into your mind. You have a choice to go out from your safe place and to meet your compassionate friend, or to invite the friend in. Please take the opportunity now if you like. Now, placing yourself in just the right position in relation to your compassionate friend. You may have some respectful distance, or you may be very close, whatever feels right. Imagining your compassionate friend in as much detail as possible, especially allowing yourself to feel what it's like to be in the friend's presence. There's nothing you need to do except experience the moment. Passionate friend is a wise and all-knowing and understands exactly where you are in your life journey. Your friend might want to tell you something that is just what you need to hear right now. Please take a moment and listen closely to what your compassionate friend might have to say. If no words come, that's okay. Just continue to experience the good company. That's a blessing in itself. Perhaps you would like to say something to your compassionate friend. Your friend listens deeply and completely understands you. Is there anything that you would like to share? Your friend may also like to leave you a gift, a material object. The object might simply appear in your hands, or you can put out your hands and receive one, something that has special meaning to you. If something appears, what is it? Now, taking a few more moments to enjoy your compassionate friend's presence. And as you continue to enjoy the good company, allowing yourself to realize that your friend is actually a part of yourself. All the compassionate feelings and images and words you're experiencing flow from your inner wisdom and compassion. Finally, when you're ready, allow the images to dissolve gradually in your mind's eye, remembering that compassion and wisdom are always within you, especially when you need them the most. You can call on your compassionate friend anytime you wish. Settling back into your body and letting yourself savor what just happened. Perhaps reflecting on the words you may have heard or the object that may have been given to you. And finally, letting go of the meditation and allowing yourself to feel whatever you feel and to be exactly as you are, wiggling your toes and wiggling your fingers, gently opening your eyes and allowing yourself to come back into the room. The reason why I like to use this exercise is both to connect us to this kind of caring nature that we all have within ourselves, but also to recognize that even within difficult times, there's always potential for us to ground ourselves in warmth, compassion, and to offer ourselves the same kindness that we would offer someone else, a loved one, a friend who's struggling. Now, I'd like to open with a brief summary of some of Rick Hansen. He's a neuropsychologist, some of his work regarding creating calm and well being, happiness, and wisdom. Rick Hansen notes that as human beings, we've developed three primary survival strategies. One is that we create separation between ourself and the outer world. Happens at a fairly young age when we start to differentiate ourselves from the outside world. This is necessary so that we can learn to be independent, to recognize that we can take action in the world, that we can accomplish goals and act upon the world. Another survival strategy is, and this is both biological as well as psychological, it's just stabilizing systems within our body and in our mind. So, for example, if we feel tired, then we rest and we're able to recover and we're able to integrate new learning. If we're low on nutrients or we're low on calories, we feel hungry and we eat food to stabilize the system. If we're feeling a lot of distress in our mind, we often look for ways to create some calm. And the third survival strategy is that over many hundreds of thousands, millions of years, we've learned to approach opportunities and to avoid threats. And so these are all survival strategies. When separations break down, when boundaries break down, when balance or equilibrium is lost, and when we're faced with new threats, the sympathetic nervous system is activated. Sympathetic nervous system is the system that is involved with our fight or flight response. When the default mode in our brain is active, this is during times where we really have nothing to do. We're not focused on a specific task. Um, we tend to scan our environments for threats. So there's this low level awareness of looking to see if there's any danger within our physical environment, but we also scan our internal environment and our inner world to see, are there threats of rejection, threats of failure. What's significant about this is there's a strong negativity bias in our thinking and our attention when the default mode is active. In other words, we tend to focus on things that potentially could go wrong or things that have gone wrong in the past. When we evaluate ourselves, we tend to focus on the things that we're not doing well. Within any particular physical environment or experience, our attention gravitates to things that we find unpleasant much faster than it does to things we find to be pleasant. And so while we have these survival strategies, they often can create discomfort. So thinking about the sympathetic nervous system, when there is mild activation of the sympathetic nervous system, we actually feel energized, we feel enthusiasm, we feel passionate about good things. And so it plays an important role in all those areas. But when the sympathetic nervous system is highly activated, our brain starts to release a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. Our heart rate increases, our blood pressure goes up, there's dilation of our pupils and our lungs. Our immune system gets suppressed. So does our reproductive system and our digestive system. Our emotion starts to intensify. We start to seek out and really attune to negative experiences. And the body is preparing us for action, for the fight or flight response. Now, while this is, again, necessary for our survival, if we did not have this fight or flight response, we all would have been eaten by tigers long ago. So it's important that we have this response. But when we have chronic activation of our sympathetic nervous system, there's a really extensive body of research that shows that this causes us gastrointestinal problems, immune system problems, cardiovascular and endocrine health problems. It also puts us at risk for experiencing anxiety and depression. And generally, when we have this activation of the sympathetic nervous system, this is that feeling that things are not okay or we are not okay. Now, another part of the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is actually the resting state of our body, brain, and mind. This is when we're conserving energy. It's often described as the rest and digest or the feed and breathe system. When the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, we feel calm, relaxation, contentment in the body. We feel okay, that feeling okay, feeling at ease. And so the point of sharing this with you is that we're not trying to eliminate or shut down the sympathetic nervous system. What we're trying to do, what we would hope to do in our habits, in our behaviors, our actions, our practices, is to create balance between the two. And so most of the time we would like to have activation from the parasympathetic nervous system so that we can experience ease and peacefulness. It's helpful to have mild sympathetic nervous system activation for enthusiasm, for vitality, and for passion. And then we do need these occasional sympathetic nervous system spikes, the fight or flight response, to deal with demanding situations or threats. So let's talk about threats very briefly. Physical and psychological discomfort, distress, and pain are threat signals. They arise in our conscious awareness when our body, our mind, or our relationships are perceived to be in danger or when harm is being done. So I started off the presentation asking, what is it like when, things feel like they're not okay? And that is that awareness, that perception that there is potential danger to our body or to our relationships or danger within our mind. Now, what's important to note is there are real physical threats in the world. There's dangerous things that happen in the world. And these, of course, will trigger our stress response. But also, many of the perceived threats that we experience are created in our mind and are not necessarily real threats. So, for example, self-criticism, self-judgment, self-aversion, these all create a sense of threat. We start to point out our flaws or focus on all the things we're doing wrong. When we start to say, I'm failing, this creates a sense of threat. Also, when our mind wanders away from the present moment, I mentioned earlier, we often are seeking out kind of potential danger. And so when our mind wanders into the past, it tends to focus on things that went wrong much more often than it focuses on things that went right. When our mind wanders into the future, we tend to think about things that could go wrong. When our mind wanders to saying, how am I doing in life? Most of us, the response is not good enough, or I could be doing better. And when our mind starts to wander into thinking, what do other people think about us? We almost always assume that they're judging us much harsher than they really are. So mind wandering itself, going through these different types of simulations, which are really designed to try to protect us from failure or rejection or physical harm, or protect our family. These simulations, when they become frequent or habits of mind, then they continue to activate the sympathetic nervous system. It's also important to note that when we resist uncomfortable emotion or mental events or thoughts, when we try to not think about something, or we say, I don't want to feel this, it actually tends to make us feel it more, tends to increase our suffering. When we try to avoid things that we really can't avoid, that starts to create more suffering, creates feelings of helplessness or loss of control. Okay, so that's threat signals. In addition to these kind of threats that can activate the sympathetic nervous system, psychologist Tara Brach, her work, she talks about that many of us grow up in a culture where many of us are taught that there's something wrong with us, that we're not good enough, or that we don't belong, or that we're not worthy of love, that if somebody finds out who we really are, they're going to leave us or reject us. And so the trance of unworthiness speaks to kind of usually an unconscious belief system of feeling like there's something wrong with us. This also creates a feeling of not okay. And so how can you notice when you're falling under the trance of unworthiness? Some signs that this is happening is when you feel like you need to prove yourself, or if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, or if you're constantly engaging in self-improvement projects. The irony about self-improvement projects is that on the one hand, you may create some new behavior that you want in your life, but when you're constantly trying to fix yourself, on a deep level, you're confirming the belief that there's something wrong with you. Other signs of falling into the trance of unworthiness are seeking approval from others, overworking, over consuming substances or social media to dull feelings of shame, avoiding taking risks and making mistakes, feeling like you need to be perfect. There's a lot of overlap between the trance of unworthiness and what's often described as the imposter syndrome. When the trance of unworthiness is present, this in itself creates this kind of arousal state, this feeling of being unsafe, not okay. So what I'd like to move to is thinking about how can we start in an intentional way to create more feelings of being okay, even when we're faced with threats, stresses, challenges, things that are outside of our control. And so this is again from Rick Hansen's work, the idea of cultivating virtue, which he defines as regulating actions, thoughts, and words to bring benefits and prevent harm for self and others. So that kind of intentional practice of let me cultivate certain healthy actions, let me learn to think in new ways that are kinder, more realistic, more compassionate. Let me pause before I speak and see that I use words that are not going to harm others. So that's virtue. And the more we practice virtue, we develop those neural pathways that are associated with regulating our actions and our thoughts. And we're able to bring in the positive experiences of connecting with others, being kind to ourselves and others. Mindfulness is really important because for several reasons. Mindfulness brings awareness to what we're experiencing. And so when things are difficult, there's a tendency that we just try to push through, try to ignore the warning signs. Say, I just need to get through this. And what happens is that it accumulates over time and we feel very stressed out and overwhelmed. So mindfulness is slowing down and acknowledging what physically is going on with me, what emotionally is going on with me, what kind of thoughts am I having? And so once you bring awareness to what you're thinking and feeling, you then start to create opportunities for more freedom in deciding how you want to act and respond to situations. The other reasons why mindfulness is important is because when we come into the present moment, then we're leaving, we're focusing on what's happening right now. And then we're leaving behind that kind of anxious thinking about things that have gone wrong or could go wrong or self-judgments. So we're pulling ourselves out of self-critical thinking when we attune to the present moment and what we're feeling, or when we or when we engage our thoughts and emotions where we kind of step outside of them and just observe them without judgment. The other thing about mindfulness is just simply tuning into your body in itself activates the parasympathetic nervous system and creates calmness and ease. And then finally, wisdom is understood by figuring out what are my long-term goals? What's the type of life that I want to cultivate for myself? What are my values? And let me pause and not act out of habit or not emotionally react, but let me start to make decisions that are consistent with my values and my long-term goals. And the more we do this, the more we enhance the quality of our life. Okay, so let's start with this really important aspect of regulating emotions. Regulating emotions is necessary in order to regulate actions, practice virtue. And so here is a list of several strategies. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but I will talk about a few of these. The diaphragm belly breathing is a great one. This is just this idea of taking one or two hands and putting it on your navel and practicing letting your belly really expand when you breathe. It just this does this does take practice, because when we're stressed or anxious, we tend to breathe through our chest, not through our diaphragm. So just putting that one or two hands, I would encourage you to try this if you're listening right now. Putting one or two hands on your belly, and that in itself tends to be calming to our nervous system. And then just really taking a breath where you allow your belly to rise and fall. And so this intentional diaphragm belly breathing, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Progressive muscle relaxation is where we move through different muscle groups of our body and we tense and relax them. Again, creates calm in our body, helps relieve stress. Doing a big exhalation. So this is where you take a real deep in breath and then you do a slow, long out breath. When we're breathing, our in breath activates the sympathetic nervous system, that arousal system. Our out breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, creating calm and ease. So when we do a slow, long out breath, that creates calm in our body. Mindfulness of our body just means bringing awareness to physical sensations in our body. It could mean when we go on a walk, tuning into how it feels to have our feet in touch with the ground, to feel movement in our body. Mindfulness of our body could be checking in and saying, let me feel my feet in contact with with the floor, my body in contact with the chair. It's just bringing awareness to physical sensations in your body. Again, that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Relaxation imagery. If you found that opening exercise, the compassionate friend exercise, to be enjoyable, and not all people do. Some people really struggle with imagery, and that's totally okay. So you have to kind of figure out what works for you. But if you enjoyed that exercise, knowing that relaxation imagery can create calm. Formal sitting meditation, where you set aside, it could be as little as 5 minutes. I often recommend trying to, if you're going to do a sitting meditation, to try to do 10 minutes or more. But starting using your breath as an anchor. You can have your eyes open or closed, being in a place where you're not going to be disturbed or distracted, being in a place where you feel safe. And then just starting by noticing your breath, the natural rhythm of your breath. And that when your mind wanders away from whatever, it could be your breath, it could be a mantra that you're saying. But when your mind wanders into thought, you can just note to yourself thinking, and then just bring yourself back to your breath. And the meditation practice is doing this over and over again. And again, this creates calm. So when I have really stressful days, I try to do a daily meditation practice. But on on days when things are going well, I might only do a 15 or 20-minute practice. On days where I feel a lot of difficulty, emotional distress, I try to do a 30-minute practice. And the interesting thing about that is I resist it. There's a part of me that says, I don't have time for this, or I don't want to do this. And when I sit and do a meditation in those situations, there's often a sense of restlessness, like, man, this is the longest meditation ever. Is this ever going to end? But what happens is that longer meditation, emotion and stress, you can imagine it like waves in the ocean. They eventually break. And then there's this ease that almost always settles in. Planting flowers and pulling weeds. What we're talking about here is that when a difficult memory arises or a difficult experience, let's say somebody says something that's critical of you or mean to you, or maybe you just have a thought about 10 years ago when somebody broke up with you in a relationship or criticized you and embarrassed you. When you feel these threatening events, what happens is that your body re-experiences it relives those moments, and you start to release adrenaline and cortisol, and the fight or flight starts to kick in. So when you notice that you are thinking about something that's causing you a lot of distress, intentionally pausing and seeing if it's, for example, you're thinking about when somebody rejected you or a relationship ended, thinking about intentionally thinking about who are the people who have been my friends or close to me for a long time, who treat me well, who treat me kindly, intentionally bringing in those feelings of connection. And if you can do that within the hour of the distressing thought or emotion, what happens is that you start to create a more balanced representation of what your life is really like. And you're able to, the more you do this, when your brain consolidates those memories, they're not as upsetting as they previously were. If you can bring to your awareness kind of the opposite, the positive feeling, the opposite of what your distress is about. Practicing equanimity. This is this idea that you notice your reactions. It could be thoughts that you have, or it could be feelings that you have, but you don't react to them. You just kind of observe them. It's almost like stepping outside of your head and looking in. And you can name it. You could say there's some sadness here, or there's some frustration here, or there is self-judgment here. You can observe it and you don't have to react to it. Don't layer on your suffering by saying, I shouldn't be feeling this, or I need to stop this, or there's something wrong with me. Instead, you just acknowledge it and you kind of cultivate some curiosity towards it. And you stay with the feeling or the thought until it shifts, until it moves and changes. Because all feelings eventually change and all thoughts are replaced by other thoughts. Finally, self-compassion practice. Self-compassion is the antidote to self-criticism. So I do periodic workshops in mindful self-compassion with Jack Carroll in health and wellness. I'm also a big fan of Tara Brach's RAIN self-compassion. Tara Brach is a psychologist that developed this idea of people falling under the trance of unworthiness. And she makes the point, the way that you don't live under the trance of unworthiness, which creates a low level of anxiety, feeling bad about yourself, feeling not okay, is that you have to break the trance. And the way that you do that is this is an acronym. RAN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. Recognize what you're feeling, sadness, embarrassment, fear of shame, fear of failure, what's present, recognize. Allow it to be, meaning that you acknowledge it, but you don't immediately try to distract yourself from it or to fix it or to change it. You allow it to be. In fact, you can investigate it by saying, where do I feel this in my body? Where do I feel this anxiety or this boredom or this irritation? Let me locate it in my body. Name it, let me locate it. If it's in my chest or in my stomach, maybe it's in my head, maybe it's in my shoulders or my neck. Let me actually direct my next breath in that area. Let me breathe into that space and allow it to be. Another way we can practice investigation is to ask ourselves, what am I believing about this situation? What am I believing about myself? What am I believing about others? And then the N stands for nurture. What do I need right now? That's the important question. So what do I need to remind myself? Maybe you're not alone or other people feel this way too. Maybe I need to remind myself you're doing the best you can. Maybe I need to remind myself you're a good parent, even if you sometimes lose your patience. It may be that what you need is I need to take a walk outside, or I need to get a drink of water, or I need to call up a friend that is caring towards me. I need to spend time or give my partner a hug. But this process can be used anytime you recognize that there's a lot of suffering going on. There's a lot of self-criticism and judgment going on. And it's an ongoing practice. It's not you do it once or twice and you're good to go. Part of being human is that these self-judgments, self-criticisms, they're hardwired into our DNA. So it's an ongoing practice. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to transform these difficult emotions of shame or embarrassment or anger or fear. It allows you to transform them by bringing compassion to the situation. Compassion is a positive emotion. It takes something that's really difficult and it transforms it. It doesn't mean that the pain just evaporates or goes away. But what it does mean is that you're responding with kindness. And so that in itself is a major sense of relief and promotes well-being. Okay, feeling safer. There's different ways that we can create this idea that we're under threat, that we're not safe. It can be, again, from we can feel unsafe if we get criticized by someone like a friend or family member or a coworker. We can feel unsafe if suddenly we have a bunch of work projects that are delivered to us with a short deadline. We can feel unsafe when we just notice ourselves criticizing our past actions or saying that you're failing. And so different ways to create feelings of safe, be feeling safer. For some folks, especially if you've experienced some trauma in your life, everything's on a spectrum. So it's not that you're going to get to this place. And the reality is there's lots of danger in the world. I mean, bad things happen in the world. So there's no like, I'm just going to be feeling completely safe. But we can help ourselves feel safe, or we can use positive imagery like the compassionate friend meditation. We can intentionally connect with people. When we spend time with people that care about us, who support us, we feel safer. When we talk about problems that are going on in our lives or worries that we have to somebody who really listens to us and cares for us, what happens is that we release oxytocin in our brain. They release oxytocin in their brain. This is the bonding hormone. It makes us feel better, makes us feel safer, makes us feel like we belong. Mindfulness, bringing mindfulness to fear is similar to what I was talking about earlier with the equanimity. This is where we just acknowledge, okay, there's some fear here, or I can feel fear rising up in me, but I don't have to react to it. I can notice it. I can say, where is it in my body? I can observe it. I can ask myself, what else am I feeling? There may also be some sadness, or there may also be a sense of motivation that I need to take action. So I can become curious about the emotion without having to just react to it. We can evoke inner protectors, and this is different parts of yourself, tapping into different parts of yourself. So most of us have this prosecutor inner critic part of ourselves that wants to tell us all the ways that we're messing up and all the things we're doing wrong. So that's often described as the prosecutor self. And that connects to another part of ourself, the victim part of ourself, the part that feels bad or ashamed or like we're being attacked. But there's also a protector part of ourselves. And so when we find ourselves criticizing, saying to ourselves, you're no good, we can say, let me tune into the protector side of myself, that this is not I'm a good person. It's, it's not okay it's not helpful to talk to myself this way. So we can kind of tap into these different sides of ourselves. We can also seek out refuge. And so what is meant by this is there are places or activities or people or spiritual or philosophical truths that we can turn to that provide us a sense of refuge. So for me, I mentioned earlier, if I'm feeling a lot of difficult emotions, refuge for me is I have a neighborhood park that I walk to, and I have a tree that I feel comfortable sitting against. And I may do a formal sitting meditation, or I might just absorb the sun and listen to the birds. But this place is a place of refuge for me. So with that, and I'll say for me, those that know me, I have a 8-pound Yorkie, Yorkshire Terrier named Cujo. He's a place of refuge for me. If I'm feeling down, I can just turn to him and give him a pet. His tail's wagging. We can go toss the tennis ball. So having said the importance of this is that we need to know, where can we take refuge? And so for this activity, if you're someone that likes to write things out, you can write it out. You can use a notepad on your phone. But I would encourage you just to ask yourself to answer these questions, either on the notepad on your phone, or writing it down. What is the answer? And you can have more than one answer for each one of these. But ask yourself, how would I complete these sentences? I take refuge in blank. For each one of these, I'll give you like 20 seconds. 10 to 20 seconds. I go for refuge to blank. And if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. I come from blank. There is blank here. Blank flows through me. I am one with blank. You did this exercise, anything that arose in your mind for any of these different prompts can be potential sources of refuge. Again, you'll have access to this PowerPoint, so I know we're running through these activities quickly. I would encourage you to revisit this activity if it seems like it can be helpful. Okay, it's also important in terms of intentional practice that we notice and we savor positive emotions beyond just happiness. And so if you see here on this screen right now, in the top, what you have are pleasant emotions where there's usually a lot of energy involved. And then at the bottom, you have pleasant emotions where there's lower levels of energy involved. But why I'm sharing this is that, it's not often, not every day are we feeling upbeat, but if we can tune into feeling content or grateful, we might feel a little playful. There's all this range of different pleasant emotion. And so just pausing throughout the day when any of these feelings arise and allowing yourself to stay with that feeling. So if you notice that you're feeling playful, sometimes I'll be walking down the stairs and I want to make up some silly song just off the top of my head. And I'll allow myself to sing the song for 30 seconds. It's just something I just make up. Um, if I'm feeling really focused in a positive way, where so I'm really immersed in my work, I might note to myself, "Wow, I'm really focused right now." If you get, um, you know, uh, let's say you listen to some calming music and you're feeling really mellow, allowing yourself to note, "I'm feeling mellow." There is power in naming our emotions, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to come into the present moment, to tune into it. And the more we notice positive emotion, the more we experience positive emotion. So it's a positive feedback loop. But it takes practice, because often our mind is wandering away from the present. It's focusing on what we need to do next, or what happened yesterday, or questions about what am I doing with my life. And so it's really easy to skip over these feelings. I like to go for runs sometimes, and I realized about a year ago, 2 years ago, that often I would go for a run, and at the end of the run, if I tune into it, I feel accomplishment, I feel endorphins, I feel good. But very often I would finish a run and I would just immediately move into a work task and not allow myself to reap the benefits of that positive emotion, to tune into it. So this requires intention. Okay, so setting intention to cultivate positive emotions. There's a list of several things on here. The idea of writing a gratitude letter. This is where you write a letter to somebody. You think about a time when someone's done something kind for you or helped you out. You write a letter, you deliver it to them in person, and you read it to them. Gratitude journal. This is an idea that you try to every day or once a week write down 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for. But I always encourage folks, try to identify the little things. Like, it's easy to say I'm grateful for my kids and for my partner and for my house. try to tune into like, I'm grateful for the way the sun shines through the window around 10 a.m. Or I'm grateful for when I walk outside and I hear birds chirping. Or I'm grateful for when I'm walking my dog and he looks up at me with curiosity. The more specific and the more small the things are that you can identify being grateful for, the more well-being and quality of life. And so if you do a gratitude journal, try to change it up every day with focusing on the little things that we normally don't acknowledge. A daily what went well exercise. This is just at the end of the day saying, let me write down 3 things that went well today. You could ask yourself, why did they go well? What, how do I feel, or how did I feel during that time? I love this metaphor. I guess it's a Native American parable that everybody has within their heart the wolf of love and the wolf of hate. And what matters is which wolf you feed. So intentionally feeding the wolf of love, which goes along with the next one on the list, which is bringing kindness into your actions and your words and your thoughts throughout the day. Saying, what's something kind I can say to myself? Or what's something kind I can do for a family member? What's something kind I can say to a coworker? When we make again, if we practice this, the more we practice it, the more we do it, and the more positive emotion we feel. I already spoke about self-compassion practice, but there is one specific meditation, loving kindness meditation. You can find it on YouTube. It's a great meditation practice for enhancing sense of well-being and connection for others. Active listening and active constructive communication. This is when we really listen to folks and we celebrate their successes with them. We join them in their successes. Forest bathing and nature engagement is tuning our physical senses, really tuning into our physical senses with nature. And this creates positive emotion and well-being. Okay, so here's my reference sheet. This is a lot of the research and a lot of the practices that I shared today are pulled from these authors and from these books. And just to remind everybody, I am one of the therapists in the Office of Work Life, and every faculty and staff, as well as their dependents and retirees, are eligible for 5 free sessions every fiscal year. And I know we just have a couple minutes left, but Zeta, do we have any questions that are in the chat?